I will call Graham Morris to move the motion, then I will call the Minister to respond. Can I remind other members that they may only make a speech with prior permission of the member in charge of the debate and the Minister. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention, for 30-minute debates. I call Graham Morris to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Sir Jeremy, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'd like to beg to move that this House has considered rail services on the East Coast, on the East Durham coastline. Now, today, given today's date, Sir Jeremy, some might expect me to start with an April Fool's joke. You know me so well. But after don't do it. No. But after hearing about the state of rail services in my constituency, I think we will all agree no exaggeration or joke could be more ridiculous than the reality my constituents face every day. The service is characterised by delays, no-notice cancellations, dangerously overcrowded trains, particularly during peak periods, which all too often leave passengers stranded on the platforms. In London, this may not be an issue, with the next service arriving in a matter of minutes. At Seaham and Horden, one cancelled service means at least an hour wait. Rail links should promote connectivity, providing opportunities to access education and employment. However, Northern Rail's failing services mean my constituents cannot depend on these transport links to maintain employment.
On that point, will you give way?
I'll happily give way to my friend.
Yes, thank my honourable friend for giving way. And would he agree with me that these opportunities that he's described affect his constituents in Easington, but extend down to my constituents in Billingham, in Teesside, and prevent our constituents seeking employment and education opportunities in the major conurbations of the North East?
Absolutely. I'm grateful for that intervention, and it's a point that's absolutely well made that I completely agree with. It's not just affecting the Easington constituency, but Hartlepool and Billingham and the Tees Valley too. It not only undermines local opportunities, but damages our local economy, takes wages out of our community, with people forced to move closer to work or to areas with more dependable transport links. The community welcomed the reopening of Horden Station in June of 2020 after a prolonged battle to secure much-needed transport investment, but it was meant to unlock economic opportunities in Middlesbrough, in Sunderland and Newcastle. Instead, its unreliability and lack of additional services have only worsened pre-existing problems further down the line at Seaham. As a frequent passenger myself, I experienced the chaos caused by cancellations and insufficient capacity. And like my constituents, we simply cannot depend on Northern Rail and expect cancellations, delays and dangerous overcrowding, particularly when there are only 2 carriages at peak times. I'll give way to my honourable friend, the member for Strangford.
I commend him for this, and not only does it impact upon jobs and getting to your work, but it also impacts upon those in the countryside who need the transport to try and get to wherever they're going, whether it be doctor's appointments, whether it be work, whether it be visiting relatives. So the impact upon those who live in the countryside in rural isolation is compounded as well. Does he feel that because of that and what he's outlining, that really there needs to be a commitment by government to sort out the shortcomings of this particular rail line?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Strangford. He's absolutely correct. And I do welcome the government's recent decision to publish train cancellation and delay data, including monthly figures on the worst performing stations, and that's via the ORR, the Office of Road and Rail. Holding operators to account is essential if we want things to improve. However, what the data doesn't capture are the passengers left on the platform due to overcrowding. Whether through cancellation or left stranded on the platform due to dangerous overcrowding, the outcome is the same. Passengers scrambling to find last-minute alternative means to travel. In the last 12 months, on average, 6% of trains were cancelled at Seaham and Horden, at least 1 train every day, and only 2/3 run to time within 3 minutes. With 1 train per hour, these cancellations and delays have huge impacts Northern Rail's performance is also erratic. In September of last year, there were 38 cancellations on this route. By October, that number had skyrocketed to 186, almost 5 times as many. By the end of 2024, the situation had deteriorated still further, leaving residents with no reliable means of reaching work, school, or vital appointments, such as health appointments by train. Northern attribute this in part to staff sickness, with driver absences at 17.6% and conductor absences at 16.9%. But my view, Sir Jeremy, is that questions need to be asked about what is driving such high levels of sickness at Northern Rail. Northern's proposed solution, and I've met the Chief Exec and senior officers on a number of occasions, that their proposed solution relying on rest day working is simply not sustainable. And I fear it's likely to increase staff sickness over the longer term. This is a safety critical industry, and we need to ensure staff are safely rested and not under pressure to work at unsustainable levels. The industry should not be running on voluntary overtime. It must employ enough staff to ensure resilience in the system. Another long-standing issue on this route is the lack of rolling stock. Now, until 2019, believe it or not, Sir Jeremy, we're still served by those old Pacer trains from the 1970s. We now have second-hand ScotRail class 158s and 156s, which have been refurbished, and in the North East we're more than willing to accept repurposed rolling stock, but only if the service is regular, reliable and meets our transport needs. A long-standing point of contention is Northern running only 2 carriages during peak periods instead of 4. The lack of carriages is not just inconvenient, it's a health and safety concern. I've previously in debates raised a case of a young boy who fell unconscious on an overcrowded train. I can't imagine the terror watching your child going limp, eyes rolling back and collapsing, with no escape in an overcrowded carriage. Overcrowding is still a concern. On match days, I happen to be a Sunderland supporter, Sir Jeremy, but sometimes as well when Newcastle are playing, scores of people are left on the platform at Horden and Seam because the once an hour 2-carriage train is already full from people who are getting on the train at Stockton and Billingham and Hartlepool, and the train's absolutely crammed, so you just can't get on. My constituents are left feeling angry and frustrated. Since I became the MP in 2010, this issue has been raised repeatedly, but very little has changed. I therefore welcome my government, the new government's commitment to the creation of Great British Railways. We cannot promote economic growth with failing public transport until our broken railway system is finally back on track, as we end decades of waste and start restoring public trust. But there's a lot more to be done. Northern Rail actually returned to public ownership in 2020 after the previous franchise, which had taken millions of pounds in dividends in return for even substandard services then. While there may no longer be dividends rewarding failure, the service remains substandard. I would like to thank the Rail Minister for meeting with me and other colleagues recently to discuss the government's plan, which is fantastic, to procure 450 new trains for Northern Rail. It's a very welcome step. However, I wonder if the Minister in his response can confirm how many of these trains will be allocated to the East Durham coastline. Given the isolation my constituents feel due to unreliable transport, will the Minister prioritise East Durham for the delivery of newly procured trains? This long-term investment in new rolling stock is essential. It's fantastic, but its impact will not be felt until at least 2030. And I believe, and many others do, we need some interim solutions, which, if you don't mind, Sir Jeremy, I'd like to outline in the time that's remaining. Because I've been told time and time again, not just to bring problems, but to bring some solutions. Not just by this government, but by the last one. So, firstly, Grand Central, the open access operator, has submitted 2 applications to the Office for Road and Rail. One seeks to extend their track access agreement beyond 2027, but the other proposes more services, including a new stop at Seaham. The Grand Central service currently runs through that station without stopping. This would not only provide additional capacity to Sunderland and Hartlepool, where services are severely overcrowded, but also create the first direct link from my constituency to York and London. The Grand Central service already passes through Seaham. Adding a stop would only extend the journey by a few minutes. The benefits of this additional stop for Seaham cannot be overstated. Grand Central is still waiting a decision, and I kindly ask the Minister if he can provide an update on this by the ORR. I understand the government may be reluctant to expand open access operators, their contracts, given the move towards public ownership and concerns about loss of revenue. However, to my constituents, Northern and Grand Central are not running in competition. They are simply providers of rail services which are desperately needed in my constituency. Second suggestion, we must increase Northern services from East Durham to Middlesbrough and Newcastle. I was very pleased to receive a positive response to a written parliamentary question confirming that the Rail North Partnership, on behalf of the Department for Transport and Transport for the North, is examining a business case for increasing services at Horden and Seaham by December 2025. The ministerial response also said that the analysis must balance the economic and social benefits of this enhancement with the performance of existing services and the financial impact on taxpayer subsidy. But I would gently remind the Minister that the economic and social benefits of this enhancement to my constituents must not be underestimated. For those without access to cars, and we have very low car ownership in East Durham, it's incredibly difficult to get to Newcastle, Sunderland or Middlesbrough without spending hours on buses. People turn down jobs in college places because they simply have no way getting there reliably. This is a major barrier to economic growth. A small but significant improvement would be to amend the timetable of the semi-fast northern service between Middlesbrough and Newcastle. Since 2023, this 2-hourly service has skipped Seaham and Horden despite high demand. Often that service is a 4-carriage train as well, I might say. The time saved by bypassing these 2 stops, these 2 stations in my constituency, is between 4 to 6 minutes. Adding these stops would provide immediate relief to my constituents with an additional train every 2 hours. All 3 of these solutions, Sir Jeremy, Grand Central's additional stop, increasing northern services and minor timetable adjustments are needed while we await the arrival of new rolling stock beyond 2030. If we are serious about local growth in East Durham, people must be able to travel out of their towns and villages to work, study and access local amenities. Pubs, restaurants, cafes, medical facilities, shops. I wrote to the Secretary of State in January and February outlining these issues, and I would really welcome the opportunity to meet with ministers to discuss these further. The people of East Durham have waited far too long for reliable rail service. They have endured overcrowding, cancellations, an outdated network that fails to meet their needs. And while I warmly welcome the government's commitment to procuring new trains and increasing services, some short-term action is also required. Reliable transport is not a luxury. It's a necessity for jobs, education and economic growth. And I would urge the Minister to prioritise East Durham and work with me and other colleagues to ensure that Seaham and Horden finally get the rail service they deserve. Thank you.
Very grateful to the honourable gentleman. The question is that this House has considered rail services on the East of Durham. coastline, and I call the Minister to respond. Simon Lowe.
It is a pleasure to see you in the chair, Sir Jeremy, and can I congratulate my old friend, the member for Easington, on raising the important subject of rail services along the East Durham coastline. And I thank honourable members for their contributions today as well. The Government's mission for growth is our #1 priority. We are kick-starting economic growth across the country. This means more, better jobs and more money in people's pockets. But, as I'm sure my honourable friend recognises, we cannot have good and stable growth without a rail network that performs for his constituents in Easington, but also right across the North East and across the country. And let me be clear, I'm as frustrated as my honourable friend over the poor service his constituents have experienced using Northern. He mentions overcrowded services, and I fully understand that passengers get frustrated when they regularly have to stand on trains. But I'd like to assure the member for Easington that the department requires its operators to plan services and rail timetables to meet passenger demand. We issue operators with guidelines on loading, including standing times, and for most of the North this is currently 20 minutes. However, services need to be operationally resilient and provide value for money for the taxpayer, as well as a reliable service for passengers. This means that it is not possible to guarantee every passenger a seat on every service, as this would require operators to maintain significantly larger fleets to meet the demand at peak times, with trains then standing idle for much of the time. That being said, Northern, like all operators, takes its safety obligations seriously, and if my honourable friend would send me more details on specific safety cases that he mentions, I would be happy to take these up with Northern and write back to him. Nonetheless, it has been made clear to Northern's management team that its current performance is not acceptable. That is why the Rail North Partnership, through which the Department of Transport and Transport for the North jointly managed Northern's contract, issued the operator with a notice of breach of contract. We've required Northern to produce a detailed plan to improve its services for passengers, including for the constituents of Easington. This plan will require Northern to follow the necessary steps to match the Government's ambition for transport across the North. Northern must resolve long-standing disputes with the RMT conductors to deliver a passenger-focused railway that runs 7 days a week, whether on a Monday morning or a Sunday afternoon. It must develop its fleet, train crews and strengthen resources across engineering, control and operations. And I agree with my honourable friend about the importance of resilience when staff go off sick. And that's why Northern's improvement plan, of course I will.
I'm grateful for the Minister seriously addressing the issues that I've raised. And I hope he'll address the other two principal suggestions that I had. But can I just say, it's all very well talking about resilience. People's travel plans are formed by their experience. We're trying to grow the railway, we're trying to grow the local economy. When individuals go to the railway station at Seam and Horden with their families to go shopping in Newcastle or to Middlesbrough, and they can't get on the train, that experience colours their judgment. So the next time, instead of standing there in the rain for an hour, they'll choose an alternative method. They'll take the X10 or find some other means of getting there. We really need to up our game and provide frequent and regular services from these stations.
My honourable friend, look, I agree. Look, this is why this government is placing passengers at the heart of our plan for Great British Railways, and I hear what he is saying very, very clearly there. The improvement plan aims to tackle the issue by ensuring the operator develops a structure from governance to process that enables the business to better manage staff sickness. I agree with my honourable friend that the railway industry's reliance on rest day working to operate services is not sustainable. That is why my friend in the other place, the Rail Minister, has instructed Northern to ensure it recruits and trains to its full complement so that overtime can be used for additional tasks like training rather than running services. I'm ambitious for Northern to get back on the path to delivery by meeting the steps in its improvement plan, which will result in a more reliable service for passengers and for my honourable friend's constituents. Northern's overall cancellations are at more than 8%. This is not acceptable, and I share members' frustrations. That is why the improvement plan also sets a clear target for Northern. 90% of all its trains should arrive within 3 minutes of the time listed on the timetable, and cancellations should be below 3%. Now, with the permission of the Chair, I turn to services, because I did note that my honourable friend mentioned the semi-fast Northern service between Middlesbrough and Newcastle. And let me be clear, first of all, that I have noted his comments. However, I'd like to assure him that the stops chosen reflect the aspirations of a semi-fast service between Middlesbrough and Newcastle, and were chosen in collaboration with Transport for the North and its members. I should gently remind my honourable friend that Transport for the North and its members have never requested additional stopping services on the Durham coastline. The current infrastructure could not support 2 trains per hour stopping service plus 1 train per hour on the semi-fast service, given the capacity constraints on the line, which include freight traffic and shared use with the Tyneway Metro. Adding stops at Horden and Seam would require remodelling to assess its operational viability. I've also noted, I'm going to make progress, and my honourable friend would forgive me. I will also note my honourable friend's support for the now proposed services from Grand Central, and I recognise the important role Grand Central has played in improving the connectivity and choice of passengers in the North East. And that's why the Department has provided support in principle to Network Rail's consultation on the application from Grand Central to extend their existing access rights for an additional 11 years. However, capacity constraints on the East Coast Main Line mean we're not able to support Grand Central's separate application to operate additional services. This was set out in a letter to the regulator on February the 4th. I note that some of these services would call at Seaham in my honourable friend's constituency. I should like to direct my honourable friend to the improvements the government has already made to Northern connectivity and capacity. While Northern's procurement of new trains is at an early stage, and at this point I cannot say in detail where any of these will be running, I'd like to assure my honourable friends that these new trains will have greater capacity, and over time these will replace almost the entire Northern fleet, including those on Durham coast. In Sunderland, home of the best football team in the world, as I'm sure my honourable friend will agree, we are carrying out the biggest overhaul of the railways in a generation to put passengers first and deliver punctual, high-quality services. Grand Central trains already run to London 5 times a day on weekdays and 4 on weekends. This will only improve from December this year, when Grand Central runs an extra service to replace LNER's withdrawn service. Meanwhile, regular metro service also provide connectivity to Newcastle, where 2 LNER trains go to London per hour. This will again increase to 3 per hour from December of this year. In Middlesbrough, LNER continue to operate one return from Middlesbrough to London, and while additional services to Middlesbrough are heavily dependent upon changes to local station infrastructure, I remain ambitious for its improvement. Let me assure him that the Department remains supportive of a role for open access services, where they provide improved connectivity and choice for passengers. We must, however, ensure that these are a good use of taxpayer money and do not negatively impact on the operation of the network. It must be noted, whilst the Department reviews open access applications as part of a standard process, access to the rail network is a matter for the regulator, and no decision on the applications from Grand Central have yet been made. As I mentioned, the East Coast Main Line, I will go on to reassure my honourable friend about the commitment this government is making to invest in rail. The East Coast Main Line will take advantage of £4 billion of investment when the timetable changes in December of this year. This will mean 16,000 more seats daily between London and Newcastle, an hourly LNER service between both cities, more local trains north of Newcastle, new trains between Sheffield and Leeds, more services between Reading and York, and provision for additional services connecting Middlesbrough, Sunderland and Newcastle, Nottingham and Lincoln. Again, I thank my honourable friend, the member for Easington, for securing this important debate, and I thank honourable members for their brief but important contributions today.
I'm grateful to the Minister. The question, therefore, is that this House has considered rail services on the East Durham coastline. As many as are of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. The sitting is suspended until 4:30.